The medievals have long been the butt of many jokes when it comes to the subject of hygiene. Being alive in the 21st century, we do take a lot for granted, especially when it comes to sanitation. Described as one of the most disgusting jobs in history, the Gong Farmer, or Gong Scourer, played a vital role in keeping the medieval world a more hygienic place. Often overlooked and undervalued, the Gong Farmer was responsible for the cleaning of cesspits, latrines, and any other places where waste was disposed of. The work was not only loathsome and physically demanding, but it was also downright dangerous. So let's travel back in time and look at what was one of the nastiest jobs of the Middle Ages, the Gong Farmer. So you think you know everything about knights, castles, and kings? Well, hold on to your chainmail because we're starting a history channel all about the Roman Empire. Now I know what you're thinking, wait, Roman Empire, isn't that before my favourite medieval legends? Well, yes, but stick with me. Rome is where it all started. From the fall of the mighty empire to the rise of your medieval knights, it's a story that's all connected. So if you're ready to learn about this incredible time period, join the toga party over at our new channel, the Roman Empire. It's going to be totally worth the detour in your historical journey, so I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And now for today's video, welcome to Medieval Madness. Downtown dirt. During the Middle Ages, in most towns and cities, sanitation was a serious problem. There were no flushing toilets, and the stench from raw sewage, especially in the height of summer, could be unbearable. Latrines might be in backyards or houses with cesspits beneath. Pits were made so that any liquid would drain away, but the solid waste remained. They needed to be cleaned out regularly when the smell became too much, although a well-built cesspit might be left as long as a year before it needed to be cleaned, and this was where the Gong Farmer, or Gong Farmer, came in. The word gong was derived from the Old English word gan, meaning to go or going, and was used for both a latrine and its contents. Gong farmers were also known as nightmen because of their working hours. With just a bucket and a shovel as tools, their work would begin around 9 PM and finish at 5 the following morning. In his 1562 book, Survey of London, John Stowe stated, quote, "No gong farmer shall carry any ordure till after 9 of the clock in the night." Let's face it, no one wanted to be met by the sight of a cart filled with tons of congealed human excrement, or night soil as it was politely named during the day, so the Gong farmers only worked at night. In the 14th and 15th centuries, public toilets were built in major cities such as London, where they were constructed over the River Thames and waste could be carried away on the tide. But most people who lived in an urban area had to make use of a communal toilet referred to as a house of easement, or a private privy with a wooden seat and a hole, usually built outside and to the rear of houses. In a castle, the toilet room, or garderobe, generally jutted out from the side of an outside wall. It had a hole in the floor, and the waste often fell into a river, if one ran beside the castle, or a moat or a ditch. Periodically, the ditch needed to be cleaned. By the 1500s, Newcastle Castle had been mostly abandoned, and there was enough waste left behind to fill the modern equivalent of 30 shipping containers. Cesspits in castles and large manor houses could often take months or even years to fill. At Hampton Court Palace, Elizabeth I was so disgusted by the smell when it came to emptying time that she would take a little sojourn round at one of her courtiers' houses until the unpleasant business was finished. However, because of their trouble, the Hampton Court Gong farmers were rewarded well and received 6 pence a day, which wasn't a bad wage for the mid-16th century. Digging in the dirt. Gong farmers often worked in gangs of 3 or 4. One man to shovel the filth, another to pull the buckets up by rope, and the others to carry the fetid loads to the cart. They also had the strange responsibility of attacking any burglars who they caught trying to climb up the toilet chute into the house, which supposedly happened quite regularly. Gong farmers brought young children along to help them with their work. Because of their smaller bodies, it was easier for them to climb into the chutes and pits. As well as raking out the excrement, which is how they acquired the nickname rakers, they were also expected to wash out the chutes. The profession was regulated, and if waste was not disposed of in an approved manner, then the consequences could be severe. One London Gong Farmer who dumped waste down a drain was made to stand up to his neck in effluence in one of his own overflowing pipes. Then he was put on public display in Golden Lane along with a notice describing his offence. Apart from the work being physically exhausting, it was also dangerous. The cesspits were dug deep into the ground with a narrow entrance, ventilation was extremely poor, so there was a frequent danger of asphyxiation from lack of oxygen and noxious fumes like methane and ammonia. When tobacco arrived in England during the Tudor era, some Gong farmers started smoking to try to mask the stench. The pit opening was not always maintained well either, and there was a chance that they might collapse inward whilst the cleaning was taking place. Being exposed to large quantities of human waste left the Gong farmer vulnerable to diseases such as typhus and cholera. Despite the importance of their work, the Gong farmers were looked down upon by society and had to live in specified areas away from other residents. In fact, just going to the toilet in the Middle Ages was a dangerous business, never mind cleaning them. Ironically, poor Richard the Raker, who as the name states must have been a Gong farmer himself, died when he fell into his own cesspit. The planks of wood on his toilet seat must have been rotten because they gave way when he sat down for his ablutions and he fell into the murky depths and drowned. We can only imagine the fear of a child sitting over one of those dark, precarious, foul pits, scared to death that they might fall in. After all, if it could happen to a full-grown man, what chance did a child stand? Dirty deeds done dirt cheap. However, one of the perks of their loathsome job was the premise of finders keepers. Gong farmers would sift through the excrement. Yep, really. Whatever they found in the filth was theirs to keep, and it was surprising what valuable items were to be found in the cesspits. Pieces of jewellery such as a ring caught in the swath of hay as a gentlewoman wiped her tushy, or a handful of coins accidentally lost as some man dropped his breeches. The collected waste was either immediately spread on common ground or taken to a holding dump known as lay stalls, which were usually at the city limits. In the case of London, the muck was dumped at the side of the river to be loaded onto dung boats. In the late 15th century, the cost of cleaning a toilet was 2 shillings a ton plus extra for the excrement to be taken away in a dung boat. Rakers were also paid very well by real farmers, as the feces made excellent fertilizer for their crops. Some of the dumps covered huge areas. At Mount Pleasant, in what is now modern-day Clerkenwell in London, the site covered around 7.5 acres by the end of the 18th century. Scrape the dirt off. Most cities made considerable efforts to keep their streets clean. In many towns, the responsibility of keeping the streets clean fell to householders. In Oxford, one 1605 bylaw stated that all citizens had to clean the street in front of their own door every Saturday evening. In London, it had to be done each morning, and the rubbish left in a pile for the dust cart to collect. Sometimes paid men were in charge of the cleanup. In Southampton, the town crier had to clean out the gutters and bylanes twice a week, but he got into trouble because it was decided that most of the streets still, quote, lieth most filthy. Some Gong farmers were also given the task of cleaning public areas as well as collecting sewage waste, and they became known as scavengers. In Oxford, they were employed to keep, quote, sweet and cleanly the streets in the city walls, and for carrying away all soil, filth, and odour in and about the streets and before men's houses and doors. Some Gong farmers actually pulled their carts around during the day and would warn citizens that they were in the area by ringing a bell or crying out a warning. The 16th century self-styled water poet John Taylor, who spent most of his life as a waterman on the River Thames, wrote a funny dedication to a scavenger, describing him as, quote, dominator of the dung hills, lord of the soil, and privy searcher of all mixins and muck hills, simple and compound. Cleanser, cleaner, and avoider of the most turpid tuddinous, murderinious, excremental offals, muck, and garbage, invader, scatterer, disperser, consumer, and confounder of offensive, unsavoury savours, smells, scents, and vapours, who lorded it over what he called the stinkards and turdinians who lived in the city. What a bloody beautiful way of saying something absolutely horrible. face down in the dirt. During the Middle Ages, the stench from latrines was a continual problem. Even in the largest of cities like London, there were not enough public toilets. There were private cesspits in many city dwellings, sometimes in the backyard and other times under the floorboards. These pits were boarded with wicker canes or bricks. Which brings us to a little-known story about the Erfurt latrine disaster, which occurred in the summer of 1184 in the German city of Erfurt. The 18-year-old King Henry VI of Germany was forced to delay his military campaign to Poland in order to intervene in a land dispute between Landgrave Louis III of Thuringia and Archbishop Conrad of Mainz. Landgrave was a noble rank used in the Holy Roman Empire. Henry summoned a Hoftag, or assembly, to meet on the 25th of July, the Feast of St. James, on the upper floor of a two-story building close to Erfurt Cathedral. The meeting was attended by some of Henry's courtiers, prominent citizens from the city, and local nobles and bishops, as well as the Archbishop and Landgrave Louis. It turned out that the wooden support beams of the upper floor were rotten and unable to withstand the weight of so many attendees, so the floor buckled and collapsed. As a consequence, the force of the people and wreckage falling through the building also caused the destruction of the ground floor as well, with some of the debris and people falling into the cesspit below. Some 60 people died either from injuries due to the fall or from suffocation in the sewage. The Chronicle of St. Peter's Church in Erfurt lists several noblemen among the dead. In an act that saved their lives, luckily King Henry and Archbishop Conrad were sitting in the alcove of a stone window and avoided the drop. They had to hang on where they were though until rescuers arrived with a ladder and they could climb down. After the accident, Henry left Erfurt and immediately returned to his military campaign. Sadly, the dispute between Landgrave and the Archbishop remained unsolved. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please join me in feeling incredibly grateful in the sanitary conditions of many places throughout the modern world. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the day-to-day life of the medievals, then please do subscribe to this channel as we release a new video every Friday, and we really appreciate any and all support. Thanks so much everyone, and I hope you all have an amazing week. Cheers!